My name is Bernard Billings, and I was born on October 20th, 1924, and I currently reside at 5764 Hanson Circle in Murray. At the age of 17, went to work at the mine that was in Bower, Utah. I worked for Combine Metals there until 1943, at which time I was drafted into the Navy. After I was discharged from the Navy, I then went back to Willa, where I worked in the mine. They held my job open while I was gone. I worked in there until 1949, at which time I went to work at the United States Smeltings mine in Bingham Canyon.
The mine in Little Cottonwood Canyon that you worked for Hecla,
Yes.
do you remember the name of that mine?
Oh, it was called the Drain Tunnel.
Okay.
They were running a tunnel from Big Cottonwood Canyon over to Car Fork in Park City, that they had a mine there. I worked in Ophir Canyon until well, I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and until I was running a tunnel that was in real bad ground, and I got in a cave-in which broke my right leg, and so I left there. And I was in the hospital for quite a long time, and I had a cast on my leg for a year. And in the meantime, they had shut the mine down that I was working in. And so I decided to go into business for myself, and I rented equipment, and I went to work for several different companies, blasting for riprap and that type of thing. And then I decided that I would buy some equipment and just do custom blasting for anyone who wanted the work done. And I worked there until it was about 1978. Then my brother-in-law, who worked for Staker Paving, he said they needed somebody to do their blasting, and so I stayed there doing their blasting for 10 years, and then at that time I was 65, so I retired.
Were you married at the time? Did your family go to all these different places with you?
No, my family stayed here, and I just had to go by myself and was glad to get home once in a while.
Mm-hmm. When you were working away, where did you live? Did you live in a trailer house or in a mine camp?
Oh, uh, most of the time we would live in an abandoned house at the mine site.
You mentioned working for U.S. mining and smelting um, at Tooele and some of their mines. What did they smelt? What were they processing?
They were processing ore, which consisted of lead, silver, and copper. They were, well, McFarland and Hollinger was hauling their ore to the smelter. So that's where I got acquainted with them.
When you worked in Bingham Canyon, were those open pit mines then, or were they tunnels?
Were underground, all underground work. Actually, we were down under the pit. Yeah, the mine there was 3,200 feet deep.
What's the difference in mining techniques between an open pit and an underground mine?
Well, underground mines, they follow the veins of ore, and the ore there is generally pretty high grade. It's high grade enough to ship to a mill or a smelter right in its pit form, which they grind it down and use agents with it to remove the different metals. And open pit mine, they take areas, they sample it, and if it has enough mineral contact, why then they go in and blast that, and then they put it in over a dump, and then they run acids and reagents through it, and they can recover just traces of gold that way.
In your experience in the Bingham Canyon mine, how was that different from your experiences in Fry Canyon?
Well, really, it wasn't. It was about the same. You done the same thing. You would work in a tunnel or maybe follow a vein, which was called stoping. And a stope is on a vein which runs, upward or downward, and you just follow the vein until it gives out or it comes out to the surface.
How did the technology of mining change from when you first started underground mining to your later underground experiences?
Well, it changed quite a lot. When I first went to work, I went to work in a tunnel, which there was 3 of us, and after it was blasted, why the next shift would come on, and they would set up a screw bar or a jack bar, which was mounted what they called liners on it, and these liners had a hand crank on them that you would turn them to make them go into the rock. And later on, they sent liners out that were automatic. You just set them and they would drill by themselves. All you had to do was change steel. When we first started, they would forge the bits on a piece of steel. They weren't detachable at all. And you'd have to carry maybe 4 pieces each of the 3 changes of steel. And then you would bring them, when they were dull, you'd bring them out and they'd send them out to the blacksmith and he'd sharpen them again. And then later on, they started putting threads on the steel, and you would put detachable bits on there. And this was a lot more convenient to do the drilling that way. And then later on, they started making bits with carbide inserts, and they would go a long time before you had to sharpen them or change them. Then the drilling changed from these jack bars, and they had what they called a jumbo, which had the machines mounted on, and you would, instead of mucking while one was drilling, the 2 of you would muck the waste up, and then you just roll the jumbo in, and the 2 of you would drill. That made it a lot faster. And then they changed from the jumbos. They changed to what they call a jack leg, which was a jackhammer with an air leg on it. And they were a lot of work. I mean, we had about 100 pounds of air pressure, and when the cylinder was the leg was about 3 inches, so when the air hit that, you had about 300 pounds of push on the jackhammer, which made it a lot easier than just pushing the jackhammer in with your hands.
What did you do underground for lighting so you could see what you were doing?
Well, at first we had carbide lights, which you had a light and you had to carry a can of carbide with you. And then later on they moved to electric lights, which you had a battery and a light, and it would last 8 hours. And every time you come out of the mine, you would hand it into the lamp man, and he would service it and put it on charge, and it'd be there when you came back on the next shift.
In the coal mines, when a miner goes underground, they have a little brass tag that's their number, and they put that in their shirt pocket or their pants pocket. And when they come out of the mine, they give that back to the guy in the bathhouse so that the mine operators know whether there's a miner left underground. Was there any system like that in the mines that you worked in?
No.
How did they know that you got out?
Well, you had a little brass tag, and when payday came around, you'd show them that. So if you made payday, well, they knew you were all right.
Tell me a little bit about working with explosives. What kind of explosives? Did you have to build your own charges, and how did you do that?
The the explosives came. We had at first we used what they called gelatin explosive, which had a certain percent of nitroglycerin in it, and it had an electric primer. You would load that way. Generally speaking, they would say a stick to the foot was how much you would load in, and that worked pretty good. And later on, they started using ammonium nitrate. Now that came in 50-pound sacks, and we had a blowgun which would suck the nitrate out of the sack and put it in the hole. You would first insert a primer, which was a stick of gelatin powder, and then you would blow that in, and we generally had electric primers to do that.
When you were drilling out the face where you were going to set your charges, how many holes would you make on that face?
Generally about 28 or 29.
And were they in a particular pattern?
Yes. We would use what we called a burn cut. And that would be, we would drill 9 holes about 1 inch apart, and you would only load the center one. Then you had what they called relievers around that, which would start what we called the cut, and then you would have rows of 4 across the face to take care of the rest of the round.
So are you the one that set off the charges?
Yes.
Tell me about how you did that and how you kept yourself out of harm's way.
Well, we had what we called lead wire, and we had an electric line in the tunnel that we were working in, and we had what we called a blasting switch, and that would be, say, maybe 400 or 500 feet away from where we blasted. And then we would hook that all up, and then when it was blasting time, we would set it off.
Was there some sort of signal to let other miners know that there was an explosion going to happen?
Generally, they would have a time of day set for, they'd call it blasting time, which was usually just about a half hour before you left for the outside. Because after you blast, there's a lot of toxic smoke that collects in the mine. So you have to wait until that all clears out before you can go back in. Because the blast uses all of the oxygen out of the air.
What did a miner earn? What kind of money could be made?
Well, when I first went to work, I got $5.45 a shift.
And was that good money at the time?
Yes, it was. See, I'd moved from picking up potatoes for 50 cents a bag, and I thought I had the world by the tail.
If you think back on your experiences as mining, what was maybe the most dangerous situation you ever found yourself in?
Well, I I was working at the U.S. mine, and I was working in a stope. In this stope was about 20 feet wide, and we would put the timber in. And one day, we were working at the far end of the stope. It was about 100 feet long, and a guy that we had running the slusher, he came running up and he told us, "Hey, you guys better get out of here. This stope is caving in." And just then I was drilling with what they called a stoper, which drilled straight up. And all at once it just yanked it out of my hand. We had lost a whole set of 42 feet. There's a big boulder that just come down, and it was so heavy it just took the timber out. And we waited until we figured it had quit, and then we took off and run out of it.
What about when you operated with your partners at Fry Canyon?
We started our shaft. It was just up 12 feet from the bottom of the wash. And one night, we had run 2 shifts so that the mine was running all the time. And there was a flash flood that come down, and it came up to within about a foot of the shaft. It was rolling boulders that was as big as a car down that wash. It was more or less a flash flood of mud. But the company furnished us with a 4-wheel drive, one of those Dodge Power wagons, and that's what we rode to work. And we had to cross the bottom of that wash to get out, to get back to our camp. We lived in trailer houses. Yeah. It was pretty scary getting across that.
I'll bet. What was your favorite part of mining?
It was in the wintertime. It was going in out of the cold and getting into where it was the same temperature all the time. And the worst part was coming out with wet clothes on when it was cold.
Were there any union organizers around? Were any of these mines unionized?
Oh, yes. When I worked at the United States Smelting and Refining, we had our own union. And so one of the crew, one of the miners would be the president of that union. And when we were in negotiations for a new contract, that he is the one that would represent us to the company. Later on, we got affiliated with the United Steelworkers, and they had a union called the Mine Mill Union, which most mines belong to.
Did you ever get involved in union activities?
I'm afraid so. You know, what the miners started doing was, instead of going on strike, they would have a slowdown. You know, like some of them wouldn't do anything. And my particular incident was they send a company man, and he would write down everything you done all day long. He'd get in the road, and what he was trying to do was figure out some thing that when we'd say, well, we've got to have more money for this, and he'd say, well, they don't need any more money because all they're doing is sitting around all day. You know, I got blacklisted.
Did you?
You know, because I told the guy doing the monitoring he'd better get out or I'd take the axe to him.
Did you like mining uranium any better or any worse than you liked mining the hard metals?
I didn't like uranium at all. It was, I don't know, it was, I figured it was too dangerous. Because they wouldn't use timber support. They'd just have big open glory holes. And while we were there was several miners got killed because they got caved on.
Can you think of anything else you'd like to tell us about your mining experiences?
Oh, I think that about does it.